think we're live. Marc,
B-
howdy.
Boom, howdy. Do you say that over there? Do you guys say howdy?
Not really. I don't know where that come from. Maybe it's just because I've got hat gear on. Maybe I feel a bit like a cowboy today.
Yeah, we had the Super Bowl yesterday.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah,
Well,
yeah, we
how
had
did I
this.
miss that?
Yeah, I thought it was watched globally. There's every Super Bowl gets around 100 million views.
Mm,
So, if you go on, my LinkedIn or you go on the LinkedIn of other folks here in the U.S., there's all these articles about the Super Bowl halftime show and how they fund new acts and what's the pay rate and should they perform for free and because it's the biggest stage in the world where you have 100 million people at the exact same time looking at your performance and that tends to catapult careers and catapult sales. So I don't
mm.
know if you or any of your listeners saw that, but we just had the Super Bowl yesterday.
I'm sure they probably did. I mean, usually I'm aware of the Super Bowl because 9 times out of 10, there's some advertising campaign going on around the Super Bowl, and it's kind of like a big thing, isn't it? Like who's advertising at the Super Bowl? And I remember a couple of years back, one of the kind of like I would say biggest advertising campaigns in this kind of industry, in the voice AI industry, was when Mercedes spent. I don't know how many millions it was, but they spent a decent proportion of money on advertising in the Super Bowl slot over the ad break, and it was specifically, I don't know if you remember that advert where it was a guy who was running around. He's just going around town basically, and like things are just happening and just manifesting for him. So he'll go into a coffee shop, and all of a sudden the coffee is just waiting for him on the corner. And he'll go into the street, and all of a sudden music starts playing, and all these mad scenarios start manifesting themselves. And then he climbs into his Mercedes at the end, and he says, "Hey Mercedes, play such and such." And the whole advert turns out that it was all about how using your voice to get things done gives you superpowers. And the whole ad was all about the Mercedes voice assistant, which is almost like a marking a kind of point in history where the Super Bowl ad is all about voice capabilities, which was really interesting.
That is so cool. Did you by any chance, Kane, see the recent Alexa ad for the Super Bowl?
I don't think I did. Not from this year, I don't think.
Oh, it was like actually funny. It was what if Alexa could read minds, and
Ah,
it would
nice.
have you being next to Alexa, and then you'd have your spouse, and it would say reminding spouse to clean the kitchen, that kind of thing.
That is class.
So
It's
it
mad,
was like,
but
yeah.
it's just got it shows though, doesn't it? How even now, I still think that this is a very niche industry that we're both kind of working in, with very niche kind of emerging technology. Yet over the last 4 years, this technology has been featured in primetime Super Bowl ads, which is, as you said, one of the programs that has probably the largest live listenership or viewership amongst anything that ever airs in the world.
Yeah, it used to be sci-fi. And I think that's kind of an interesting piece of it is that voice captures our imagination in ways that not of other a lot of other technologies can. Like the closest thing that comes to it is, flying cars. But
Yeah.
if you think about it, what was the thing we pictured from way back in the day? It was Spock saying computer and then I think it was Spock. I'm not a Trekkie. I'm sure I'm bastardizing that. But computer, do this thing. And I think that that's like, we've like pictured that as the pinnacle of technology. And now that it's actually possible, I think that people are like naturally drawn toward it because they've been picturing it for so many years.
There's almost a there's the sci-fi element, but when you bring it into today, it's almost like magic. You just say something and something happens. It's almost like it's literally how, I don't know if there's any Harry Potter fans out there. I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan, Mark, are you or not?
I read 5 of the books, and then I
Fair
got
enough.
to halfway through the 6th, and I was like, it's not. I'm done. I'm
Well, you're
done.
you're more of a fan than I am because I've never read
Yeah.
any of the books, but I've watched all the films and the films are pretty decent. Um, but basically, it reminds me of that where anything like that really, basically you've got a wand, a wizard or a witch has got a wand, and you throw it and you say something and something manifests itself. That's literally what it is, isn't it? And the recent, I don't know, you probably don't have Sky in the US, do you? I don't suppose you have Sky TV.
Don't think so.
So the equivalent of like Comcast or TiVo or something like that, where it's like your kind of like satellite TV basically, and Sky is like one of the big providers of satellite TV in the UK. And their recent advert, they've essentially created their own TV. So it's the Sky TV, right? Imagine Comcast created their own TV, their own actual hardware, and you
Mm,
bought a television from Comcast. And when you kind of, install it, it's got all of your TV viewing, anything you know, movies, TV, the whole lot. Netflix all built into the TV. But Sky's kind of value proposition of this TV is its voice capabilities. And so the advert is this little kid, and the dad comes into the room and he takes the TV off the wall and stuff like that. And he's saying there's going to be a new TV there. And this kid's dressed in this wizard outfit, and there's a big pile of clothes in the middle of the room and sheets and stuff like that. And all he's just saying, I can't remember what he's exactly saying, but he's saying stuff like TV appear or something like that. He's trying to make a TV appear.
hmm
And at the end of the advert, the TV gets delivered. It goes on the wall, and the kid starts talking to it, and the TV starts doing stuff, play something and play Harry Potter or whatever it is, and Harry Potter starts and all that kind of stuff. So again, I would say that Sky are actually a little bit even behind at the times, but what it is a piece of hardware that's being created by essentially a broadcasting company, and they're leading all of their communications and all of their marketing efforts. They're leading with voice capability as if it is magic to use your voice to get stuff done, which is, I don't think it's original, but it's very much like that in terms of how lots of companies are kind of like presenting voice capabilities. Yes, it was sci-fi, but now it's like magic,
Kane, I love that. And I'll say, my fiance and I, we got a smart TV about 2 years ago, and it has voice capabilities. So you click and hold the microphone, and you can use the voice. And what's so interesting is that the speech to text capabilities are awesome, that the search capabilities are awesome, but somehow they didn't sync up the software so the voice works at every point of the application. So if I'm on the main screen and I say play Netflix, it's like looking for shows called play Netflix. It's like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
it's supposed to go to Netflix.
yeah,
Um, so how interesting is it to see examples where the voice capabilities almost outpaced the software capabilities, the actual interface. I think there's going to be a big correction on that now for the exact sort of reason that you just mentioned, Kane, which is if we have the ability to trigger all these things with voice, it's like missing the magic. And I'll tell you, I take the remote, and if I'm trying to look up a new show, most of the time I will go to that giant keyboard that's displayed on the TV, and I'll go up arrow, left arrow, A, down arrow, right arrow, K. And
yeah,
it's like, it's terrible.
yeah.
Whereas I really want to just use my voice. I think we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. It is very fragmented right now. When we spoke to the chaps at TiVo on our podcast ages ago now, actually. But that was kind of one of the things that they were mentioning is like some of the things actually I think TiVo can do, but a huge limitation of most TV setups is that you're right. You've got all these isolated individual apps running on like an Android Tizen or whatever it's called operating system, but they're all just individual siloed apps. There's nothing exposing any content or data from outside of the app to the operating system. So the voice capabilities that sit on the operating system can't see the content that's in all of these individual apps.
Hmm.
And so you've got play such and such. And what happens on my TV is most of the time when you say play whatever, it will actually just run a YouTube search because it can do that. It can just, use the YouTube APIs, do a YouTube search, and that's it. So you can't, like, what would be ideal is that you search for something and every single app that you have installed all surfaces whatever matches that search query, and then you have the results, which is results from Netflix, results from Disney, results from wherever. But it's not quite there yet. There's interesting things happening with the TV, like SoundHound and Netflix have got a partnership now, where what that'll look like is basically the SoundHound voice capabilities will be inside the Netflix app. So if you think about watching TV, not only will you be able to search for Netflix programs, but you'll be able to utilize some of the SoundHound stack. So you'll be able to ask for the weather or order a takeaway to be delivered while you're watching a film and stuff like that. And there's another really interesting company called Disruptal, which we're going to have on the podcast. Alex, the CEO, we're going to have on the podcast in the next couple of weeks. And what they do is they kind of mine data that's associated with content, like actors and all that kind of stuff. But it even goes beyond that, to the point where you could be able to say things like, let's say you're watching James Bond, and you'd be able to say something like, what is that car James Bond is driving? And it would figure it up. Or what's that thing yapping in the background? And it would say, oh, it's this type of dog. Or, who's that actor next to Daniel Craig? And it will identify it. So a whole bunch of really advanced voice capabilities. But again, all of these capabilities, the SoundHound one, the Disruptor one, and all of the kind of Sky stuff and that, it's all fragmented at the moment. It's not connected horizontally across the TV experience.
That's incredible. The Disruptal example really jumped out to me. It's funny, by the way. Shout out to Disruptal. They're a St. Louis company, and they were actually literally across the office across from ours. So we passed the Disruptal guys all the time, and super smart group, super hardworking. But I'm thinking, Kane, about practically how they do that. Who is the actor next to Daniel Craig? So they need a language model that understands all these names of actors. So, do you go to the A list, the B list, the C list? What about an actor that is like absolutely never been heard before? So then I'm guessing what they probably do is, there's actual information about the list of actors in the show, and it does almost a text to speech, where it tries to approximate how you would pronounce that name, because there's no way that they have every single actor loaded into their language model. But that's a really complex and tricky challenge to go from the speech to text to the contextual understanding of what is happening, and then to be able to surface answers that are relevant to that. I'm excited to hear that episode.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. I think it might even be next week or the week after. But what it also does, interestingly, and it's one of the only examples of technology of this kind that has these capabilities, is, I know that Alexa and stuff like that does in part, but it's not really utilized. But it's essentially got image recognition as well. And so the way that it does things like who's that actor or what animal is that, is it actually uses image recognition, and it marries that with the data that it has. Which, yeah, but the potential of it is absolutely huge. It's whether, it's like everything, isn't it? Like with Alexa, in theory, you can ask anything to it. Same thing with Google Assistant. But the reality is it needs to have the answers that are relevant to your question. And when you begin, it's not always the case. There's so many questions someone would have, as they're watching a Netflix special or something, that making sure you've got data and content on all of those things is going to be the challenge, basically.
Okay, and I have a question that I don't know if you can answer, but I'm curious. I wonder why Alexa has not gotten better faster. It seems like with their data set that, when you ask, I'll ask Alexa, not, what's the weather? I'm trying to see if I can come up with an example. Like, what's the chance it's going to rain at 3 p.m., right? And then Alexa will say, the weather today is partially sunny with it's like, well, no. I appreciate you telling me you heard rain and you started telling me the weather, but I want to know, and you can go to weather.com and find that specific percentage that says 40% chance of rain at 3 p.m. So I almost wonder why Alexa has not gotten smarter faster. Is it just that my expectations as a user are way overinflated, or is it that it has gotten better? It's just hard to notice, or or what do you think?
Yeah, it's a challenge. So there's a third party weather skill called Big Sky, and that's quite good because that does exactly what you described. It pulls data from all of the different weather sources, and it will give you more defined, accurate kind of answers. So it's not something that's provided by Amazon. It's something that's Steve Arkonovich, I think his name is, built. But yeah, I mean, it's a good question, to be honest. I mean, if you look at the performance of all of the voice assistants, Amazon Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, and you look at like how many questions can they answer. You take like a random 2,000 questions and you ask it to each of those three voice assistants. If you look over time, they actually improve over time. So if you look from 2017 to today, you will see that each voice assistant is capable of answering more questions. And so there's a question, I suppose, of whether they are focusing on, all of them collectively, focusing on breadth versus depth. So the depth that you are requiring there from your weather, it might be that they think, well, we've kind of got weather sorted. And if you ask, what is it going to rain at 3 o'clock? And I give a general forecast, then that's kind of answering the question. That's good enough. Fine.
Mhm.
Let's move on to the stuff that we're not catering for. So it could be a breadth versus depth question. I don't know, to be honest with you. It's a good question. It has made improvements in certain areas, but there's still things that I always used to liken it to, like I used to liken it to kind of like a restaurant where you shouldn't really advertise your restaurant and bring people into your restaurant unless you've got your menu worked out.
Mm.
And Amazon kind of has its menu worked out a bit when it comes to Amazon Alexa. You can ask questions, you can play music, get the weather. Those core things have been sorted. But the use cases I always come back to all the time is like, for me, on a daily basis, what do I need? I need email, calendar, social media potentially. I need access to my notes. I need access to articles and things that I'm planning on reading or whatever. And so the two killer things for me on Amazon Alexa would be read back the articles I've saved to my bookmarks or into Pocket or something, and then take a note for me. That would be perfect. Just take a note. Just take my speech, translate it into text, and push it into Evernote. These are not hard things to do, but platform restrictions, policy restrictions, whatever it might be, certainly on the dictation part, things that haven't kind of manifested. So it's like, and that relies on third parties, obviously, relies on Evernote, relies on Pocket, relies on all of these third party suppliers. So Amazon's big push to gain adoption, I think they were trying to get breadth, but yeah, still gaps and things left to be desired, basically.
Yeah, Kane, I heard a few really interesting things you mentioned. The first is that to answer that initial need I had, the way to do it would be to go through a third-party app. And it kind of shows strategically what are the advantages of verticalizing and owning it all yourself, and what are the advantages of an ecosystem, and what are the disadvantages of verticalizing and disadvantages of an ecosystem. And it's funny that, I'm sitting here in my brain blaming Alexa and saying, oh, they, didn't give me the right answer, when, they're thinking, well, from a strategic perspective, we gave you the ability to get the answer. We allowed all these creators to create the absolute best apps and specialize. So maybe, the answer there is that, Amazon Alexa perhaps need to do a better job of connecting people to their ecosystem. And saying, oh, don't try to solve that with the built-in capabilities, solve that with our awesome partners.
Mm. Yeah, that's what they tried to do in 2017 to 2018, 2019. They had a big push on developer evangelism and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But then the developers were finding some kind of roadblocks, basically. So, that weather example, in order for a developer to build that weather example, they need to be able to get access. They need people to access that answer. So when you ask Alexa and Alexa answers, that's Amazon's built-in weather. It's not your. Sorry, I'm getting a missed phone call. I think someone might be at the door. It's when you ask Amazon, it's Amazon's native first party response that you get back, what Amazon have built. In
Hmm.
order for you to get a third party response, which would be the Big Sky one, Amazon need to at least create space within their kind of ecosystem to surface third party answers to questions and third party skills and stuff like that. That hasn't necessarily happened. So it's always been quite difficult to get your skills discovered. And then the knock on effect of that is that it's also difficult to then have returning users come back. And this has been a typical cycle that's existed with Amazon Alexa since the beginning of time,
Hmm.
where developers have always kind of complained about the lack of discoverability capabilities, and also the difficulty in getting people to return. And therefore, if you can't be found, you can't get people to return. It's very difficult to make any money from it. And so those three things together have kind of slowed it down.
Yeah, that's a challenging business model for a creator. Hope someone finds you, and then hope someone new finds you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. But there is examples of where this stuff is. I mean, Amazon Alexa, from Amazon's perspective, I've always said that Amazon would be quite happy exactly as it
Yeah.
is. Play music, use Amazon Music, use Prime Video on the display tablets, shop on Amazon, and we're quite happy with that. Thank you very much. If third parties want to build on it, fair enough. But we're not really going to do anything necessarily over and above what we have to in order to kind of push or surface that stuff. But from a core capability perspective, you could argue that Amazon Alexa kind of works for its purposes. And that's been one of the things about this voice technology and chatbots and stuff like that, is that over time, everyone's had a bad experience and they don't always work all of the time, which is a nice little segue into the experience that you were telling me about with
Hmm.
the company whose name I forget. Uh, what was it called?
Ch
Not Capital.
Charter.
Charter. Charter.
Yep.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yes, Charter is one of the big US telcos, and phone, internet, TV, that sort of thing. And in the US, I'm pretty sure, internationally, the telco space has had a reputation for having the absolute worst customer experience you can possibly have. And I mean, to the point where, you turn on the TV and there'd be a media story about a bad, telco experience. And you're like, wait a minute, this is news? Like it was really that bad. And there was a call from, it was a Comcast back in the day, where someone tried to cancel their service and the representative wouldn't let them, and it made national headlines. So that was like the experience people were used to. And I called up Charter to cancel my service because the rate had just increased, and I passed my 2-year promotional period, and I found another service here that was less expensive. So I called them up to cancel, and the representative handles it beautifully. The representative does everything right. First, thanks me for being a customer, notices how long I've been a customer, said right away he'll pop down the rate in order to match the other company and give me an extra discount on top of that, to take my last bill and bring it back to the lower rate. And we have a great experience, and he offers me all of these other discounts, just keeps adding discount after discount after discount. And I'm sitting here, like, oh my God, the longer I'm on the phone with this guy, the more money I make.
Interesting. Interesting. So, what do you think's going on there? Do you think that that agent is empowered to use his initiative or her initiative? Or do you think that this is all strategic from Charter, which is whenever someone calls up to cancel, give them anything to keep them on the line, give them anything to keep them a customer?
I think it's probably, I would say it's more the former, that the agent's empowered to make good decisions. Well, I think it's a few things. I think the agent's empowered to make better decisions. I think the second is they probably have a really tight playbook, because this must be one of the highest volume of interactions they get, is canceling service or switching service when people move, or especially when their bill goes up. Everyone has had that experience. Your
Mm,
bill goes up and you call in and say, why did my bill just go up by $20? So that has to be a big part of their overall volume. So I imagine they have a playbook, very methodically, step by step, which offers to make when. Um, but here's the thing, Kane, how it ended is I'm about to hang up the phone, and he said, hey, we actually have a mobile service. And by this point, we've been talking for 30 minutes, and I love the guy because he keeps just giving me free money. He says, we have a mobile service. We use the exact same towers that Verizon has. So, it's a quality cellular service. Do you want to switch to our mobile? And it just so happens that my fiance and I have been talking about how we wanted to condense into one phone plan, and we just couldn't find a phone plan that had the right price and quality. And this guy sold us a phone plan. So now we moved our phone over to Charter.
wow.
And how much did it really cost them? It cost them, going back to the previous rate they were charging us, plus like a $10 discount, and then maybe like a $30 thank you or something, waive a connection fee. That was
Mm,
it.
mm,
So I think that part of it is, not only are they empowered to do the right things, not only have they worked out the playbook of how to handle these inquiries in a way better way than they used to. So maybe it's almost in that case a little bit the opposite of autonomy. It's more, instead of the agent just saying, you save them at all costs, and the agent's desperately trying to save it, maybe it's a little bit more constrained. But I think the third piece is that realization that there is a real profit center opportunity with these customer interactions, that it's not just about cost savings, that if you invest in it, you can take a customer service call and turn it into a sales call.
Interesting. And that wouldn't have been possible unless that person initially had the right kind of attitude, the right kind of experience. You know, you were saying that you were getting on with him and stuff like that. It's like the rapport that people have. Obviously, the playbook and that kind of helps, but everyone's had the experience where you call a certain company and there's someone who answers who doesn't really want to be there, doesn't really feel like talking that much. Regardless of what the kind of thing is that you're trying to get done, you kind of sometimes the rapport is not quite there, and you don't really feel like sticking around in that conversation. And so, if you were offered an alternative mobile plan or whatever, half of your incentives are kind of just aligned to get off the phone because it hasn't really been a pleasant. You might have got the outcome that you were searching, but the experience itself hasn't been pleasant. So, I wonder how much of that conversation you had was down to you getting the outcome that you wanted, which is a reduced plan or staying the same, versus the actual experiential element to the rapport building and how it actually was to have a conversation with that person.
I think the experiential element was make or break, because by that point in time, I was rooting for this guy. He was my agent, and I was like, man, I have a good agent. I have a good agent who's giving me a good experience, and I want this person to have a great day. And I was rooting for him. And when he, gave me the pitch for mobile, I was like, well, least I can do is listen. He's knocked off all these rates and been very pleasant. Um, and it's interesting in the IVR when it said, click this option to get to, do troubleshooting, click this option for customer service. Interestingly, sales was not an option.
Mm,
So when I called in, they didn't say click for sales. That wasn't any of the options. It was, the only I had to click customer service. So I'm starting this relationship as a customer service relationship, and he 100% satisfies the customer service need. And at that point, he can tell I'm a 10 out of 10, and moves over to the sales need, which I think is like perfect execution. And so many businesses have the opportunity to do that sort of play better.
interesting. How do you think that? Because Charter sounds like a massive. Obviously, in the UK, I'm not quite as familiar with the company, but obviously, if it's a telco, it's going to have a large degree of scale. I'm imagining it's a very big company in the US. Um, a lot of companies that have that level of scale often have a level of either culture or a level of kind of like day-to-day stuff that they're dealing with, and find it quite hard to make transitions into new ways of working. What kind of observations would you have or pointers would you have for a company that is trying to kind of take itself from we just have to get these calls answered and get people off the phone because this is a really stressful, high volume job and we need to just kind of like get through the day, trying to position themselves and transition into a space where a 30-minute phone call with a customer who wants to cancel is absolutely fine. We'll do everything it takes to keep hold of that customer because longevity and customer lifetime value is a priority. And then also we'll even try and see if we can upsell them at the end. That's a totally different culture to some kind of contact center environment. So what would you say some of the things might be that you would think companies need to do to move towards the latter rather than the former?
First of all, I think that you have to just be patient. I think that's not the answer, but I think that's just the reality of things. Is that it probably is a multi-year effort, and you could make big headroads in a year. But if you think about it, the average agent tenure, doing one of these roles is about a year, and that's a little bit bifurcated with a lot of agents who start and drop off quickly because they're not succeeding or hate it, and then a little bit of agents who get in a groove and stay for 2 years, and kind of a balancing out the sample.
Hmm.
um, but if you think about it, then you have about a turnover. You're turning over a new leaf every single year. So if you hire up a new agent class this year, um, then that's the agent class you're going to have at the end of the year as well. So, part of it then is going to be the talent, which is what kind of talent did you hire? And I think that's one thing that's actually been changing quite a bit is people are looking for folks who have had actual like resumes and experiences in contact center. And the better contact centers are saying that you must have previously worked at another contact center. So it's almost like this whole career economy is emerging where you can be a brand new agent, you can be a somewhat experienced agent, you can be a very tenured agent, and the complexity of the calls you'll handle and the sort of brands you can work at are often dictated by that. But the talent's going up. And then the big thing I'd say that people need to do is be purposeful and be strategic. And I think that that's the thing that the best contact centers are doing today. It used to be that that was the function you didn't really think about or didn't really care about. It was just the customers are calling in, and we need to make sure that they don't get pissed. And that was the point. But I think that folks that are looking at it and saying one of our strategic pillars is to solve the customer need 100%. And then when the customer is elated, always look for some opportunity to enhance the customer relationship with new products or services. I think if someone says that is our stated contact center strategy and pairs that with good talent and looking for the best talent in the industry, I think that's how you create the cultural change. It just starts with caring and it starts with good people.
Interesting. Do you think that guy had some kind of agent assist technologies at play, or do you think he was just naturally as dynamic as he was?
I can tell you he probably didn't. But he might next year.
So on that front then, so as we know, agent assist technologies and other types of AI technologies can help to democratize knowledge, democratize those processes, and bring about a level of consistency between agents. Some people might be more experienced than others, more familiar with the processes than others. Sounds like the guy you spoke to was pretty kind of like hands-on and fairly experienced, knew what he was doing, been through it a few times, and had a bit of confidence or whatever. Um, do you think that the solution for those agents who might be new, or let's say you're an organization, most organizations with call centers are having trouble recruiting. We know that. We know that there's high levels of attrition, as you mentioned, potentially annual turnover of staff. You've got difficulty recruiting because call center jobs have often been seen as, in some cases, sometimes entry level kind of jobs, or in other cases, quite kind of like stressful, high demanding sort of jobs. Do you think that the answer is yes, as far as can technology help, but what kind of approach should organizations take to bring in some consistency between the performance of agents? Is it purely a technological requirement, or is there something else that can be done to get everyone performing like that guy you spoke to?
I think that technology is actually the greatest driver specifically of consistency. I think there are things you can do, other drivers to create great experience, and that would be values, mission, culture, training. Um, but consistency is not a very human thing. Right, and I
Mm,
think that what's interesting is for, many years, there was not a lot of technology being invested into the contact center, and we kinda got the maximum consistency that you can get through just training and reinforcement and, carrot and the stick, reward and punishment. We got as much consistency as you get there, and it's just if you have a giant group of people and you tell all the people the same thing, and then you leave and come back a month later, they're all going to be doing different things. That's just like how people operate. But technology can help keep people on guide rails and help them follow processes and adhere to systems and let the administrators know when that's not happening. So I do think that just the inherent fact that technology works the same way every time, obviously except for like small bugs and exceptions, but it's intended to work the same way every time. But people are not intended to work the same way every time. I think that in order to create consistency, technology is probably the biggest driver of that.
interesting. Yeah, doesn't get tired, does it? Doesn't slip up, doesn't kind of fall off the rails, and is very good at doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Which
Kane, you brought up an example when we were talking last week about AI that is now getting better at coding.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw DeepMind. So DeepMind have been doing some research into advancing AI capabilities, and one of the things that they mention is the aims of AI is to be able to approach new and novel problems that it hasn't seen before and solve them. So what humans are really good at is we will use prior experience, intuition, creative or critical thinking to approach a brand new situation that we've never been in before and find a way through it. Whether we find a way through it to a high level of quality, who knows? But we're quite good at encountering new situations, using prior experience and intuition or creativity or critical thinking to work our way through a certain problem, which I think is where humans perform particularly well. And when people talk about this kind of like future of AI taking jobs and all this kind of stuff, AI is not yet at a point where it can do that kind of critical thinking and approach new and novel problems. But what DeepMind have done is begun to take steps in that direction. So they created something called AlphaCode, and what it is, it's an AI program that can be given a natural language command, essentially a coding problem to solve, and it can then generate code off the back of it to solve that problem. So people might be familiar with Microsoft licensed GPT-3, didn't they? Created this kind of like coding assistant, which is that if you're writing code, there's an assistant there that will help you, finish off certain kind of pieces of code of it and assist you in the writing of it. Whereas this is arguably the first time that a computer has been given a natural language command and been able to write code off the back of that command, which is one, it's understanding natural language queries and understanding the problem at the heart of that query. And then two, it's able to essentially create a solution to that problem that it hasn't solved before and put together basically a segment of code that is intended to get achieve that result. They entered it into there's a online kind of like coding competition, and I can't remember the name of it. Let me just find the name of it now. It's Code Forces. And what they do, Code Forces, is like an online forum. They pose challenges and they compete to who can code the best solution. And this AlphaCode was ranked within the top 54% of people who entered into these online competitions. Arguably speaking, not necessarily so, because there's lots of competent programmers that don't enter these competitions, but it's producing code as good as, arguably speaking, 54% of top developers, all based off of natural language queries, which is mad progress. It's crazy.
Kane, it's totally insane. Um, at Balto, our biggest expense is probably R&D, um, and it is a massive portion of our revenue line, and we like it that way because we want to make sure we're always innovating and that we're investing in the product and the cutting edge. Um, but what I just heard from you is that you can have an average developer, a 54 percentile developer, um, obviously not for free, but for some sort of in an automated way. Um, I'm imagining what that means for software development. Like, imagine if you could have, we have about 40 engineers at Balto, not including product people. Imagine if we were able to have 5 engineers at Balto, and then those 5 engineers are managing an AI that is producing what 35 people are. We love our engineers, so we would never want to do that. But you get the point I'm making. Or I could
Yeah.
even say, imagine if each of the 40, we gave them, each of the 40 a 20% budget on top of their compensation. And we said, here's your compensation, and then you have an extra 20% to go use this AI and deploy it, and you're the AI's manager.
Mm.
Um, the fact that it's automated and its ability to scale, um, is pretty mind-boggling. It means that how fast will we be able to deploy new technologies? That's what I'm thinking is speed. Like, how fast can you go from not having much to having something that's fully written? And if you can write a couple natural language queries and have fully written software, at the quality of an average developer, And if we actually get there within 10 years, um, holy crap, like, we're seeing this exponential increase in the speed of technology being developed. It's it seems like we will absolutely continue to be on an exponential trend at that point.
Oh, 100%. It's Moore's law in action, 110%, isn't it? It's like, imagine all 40 developers that you have, each of which, I mean, I can't speak too much about the capabilities of AlphaCode. I imagine it's going to be constrained to a certain programming language or a certain type of task at this moment in time. But there's already been examples of GPT applications that have been built where you can literally just type design commands to it. So design me a website that sells groceries and put a kind of like a pear-shaped logo in the top corner and make sure that the color scheme is red and white. There's already examples of that happening where it will build you a design. And then once it's built that design, you then just type, oh no, I didn't mean that kind of white. Can you make it slightly darker or whatever it might be? And you can essentially build a design of a website using typed language. And so I don't know the constraints on breadth of this AlphaCode as it currently stands, but it's on that trajectory, isn't it? It's on a trajectory where any programming language, any type of coding problem, imagine all those 40 developers have access to one of these AI coders. And it's like, how many things could you get it to do on a day? You just be literally, you could be, yeah, it's frightening. It's the hardest part will actually be feeding it with enough commands. Because your product road, imagine your product roadmap
Yeah.
being able to be developed in the next 2 weeks from automated code.
Yeah, and then in that case, the challenge is making sure you don't create, crap that
Yeah.
you don't just keep creating because you're like, well, I have extra resources and capacity, and then you have, a Frankenstein application. So
Mm.
we might start seeing, one of the major technology and product challenges being too much breadth, not enough focus, and that this actually could enhance that challenge versus, wishing we could deploy faster.
Interesting. Do you think there's ever a point where products, and this is a slightly tangential question, but as things continue to improve all the time, and we're used to things improving all the time, we're used to things like even the Sky TV I mentioned earlier. Hardware gets a bit better every year. TVs get slightly better processors, slightly better pictures. But do you think that there are certain areas and certain elements that once it's done, and there's a standard and it's accepted? Or do you think that everything will always continue to be iteratively improved until something bigger and better comes along?
So I think, Kane, you're asking, do I think that there's any problem that we're going to solve with technology and just say it's solved, the problem is solved, we don't need to
Mm,
continue working on that problem?
yeah.
I have to imagine that there is, but I think it's probably like an economic trade-off, right? It's the sort of trade-offs that we make in our own minds where, when you clean the kitchen is not spotless. Like you could find some speck of dust or some, um, you know, little spill somewhere, but you clean it to the point where you're like, that is done, right? Like that,
Mm,
it's not worth my time or energy to keep working on that problem. Um, I think that, and then when you have that solution, that problem moves down on your priority list and something else important, moves up on the priority list. My guess is we'll solve problems where they are so nearly completely solved that it's just not worth people's time or attention or energy to keep working on them. Um, and then what usually happens is, in the course of history, that you then have some hobbyist who is tinkering with that problem and just says, oh well, what if I could make this 1% better? Wouldn't that be fun? Even though it might not be the maximum thing you can do to make as much money as possible. And then those sort of hobbyists will tinker and find some crazy new innovation that brings us into the next stage of things. So I guess the answer is like, no, I don't think that any problem is ever 100% solved, but I do think problems will be solved enough that they cease to be priorities. But like the full cycle of things is that people are just innovative and they'll keep solving things even if they're not a priority. So I guess really what that means is problems will be solved faster or slower depending on how close to being totally solved they are, but they're always being solved.
interesting.
Yeah.
That was a good quote. What was that? Things. I can't even
I can't
regurgitate
even
that.
repeat it.
That was. It was good. It sounded good. That was really. I'll have to clip that one up. Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to mention was that. So I saw. It was a while back now. Probably I would say it might be in last year. You can tell me actually. Gartner, the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I think it was Gartner that did a Magic Quadrant on agent assist capabilities, and you were in the leadership quadrant. Was it? Was it Gartner that did that one?
Gartner did not do one on agent assist. We would love them to. Forrester did a conversation intelligence, and
That's the one.
Gartner did a cool vendor.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the Forrester conversational intelligence one because I remember seeing was it Invoker that was up there, Balto was up there, a couple
That
of
sounds
others.
right.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's right. Yeah. So Gartner did do a Magic Quadrant on conversational AI
Mm-hmm.
platforms, enterprise conversational AI platforms, and uh, it was reminding me of a conversation that we were talking about a few weeks back when we were talking about buy. I think we were talking about buy versus build. We were talking about isolated capabilities versus fully kind of managed products and stuff like that. And it got me thinking about that while I was reading it because in the Magic Quadrant you have there's about 20 of them that made it into the kind of quadrant, and in the leadership spot there was like Cognigy and Core AI and Amelia and Omelia and OneReach and stuff, and then you had a few others like Google and IBM and Amazon were in there and stuff like that. Raza was in there, but Microsoft wasn't. And it was interesting to me why Microsoft wasn't in there. And in the actual report, it says that Microsoft wasn't included because they don't have what can be classed as a kind of like a full kind of platform. It's a bunch of capabilities that can be stitched together to create a platform if you want,
Mm-hmm.
or they've just got so many products that they might not have submitted the right one if they did submit the right one. They've got Power Virtual Agents, they've got Microsoft Bot Framework, they've got Composer, they've got all the isolated capabilities like Lewis NLU and text to speech and speech to text and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't included. So, and it's just a pedantic point really for me, which was that AWS was included, but Lex requires additional capabilities to be useful, requires text to speech and speech to text at least. Raza is a coding framework like Microsoft Bot Framework and like AWS if you were to use the Lex NLU on its own. And so it was just a pedantic thing of why are certain vendors included in certain things and what is the difference between certain types of capabilities. Does, are we moving to a world where the kind of productized version of things like Cognigy or Core AI rolled up into a platform product is the kind of like marker for quality, even though underneath those products, actually, some of them don't have proprietary technologies. So Core AI, I don't believe, has proprietary technologies, and a couple of others don't. They kind of just pull in Amazon and Google and all these other technologies. So are we riffing on the back of that conversation that we had the other time around capabilities versus products? Are we kind of moving into a world where productized is a marker of quality and isolated capabilities is not? Or am I reading too much into this whole Magic Quadrant thing? Because I was just surprised that Microsoft wasn't in there. That's all.
Phenomenally interesting questions. First of all, I'll talk about like the nature of those sort of publications. And the analysts like Gartner and Forrester are brilliant people who do phenomenal research and are very well read and have seen a ton of breadth. Um, if you want to think about how to apply that mentally, like what are these reports mean? My perspective is you can almost think about it as a snapshot of how the market is thinking at a certain point in time. Like this is what the market is saying at a certain point in time, and the analysts are doing their best for the speak to the market. They do a little bit of here's the direction that we think things are going, but I think actually they do a better job of capturing this is what the reality is today. And if you think about it, Gartner, as example, won't publish a Magic Quadrant until there are a sufficient number of players that are competing in the space.
Hmm.
So if you have one player who's super innovative, you're not going to get a Magic Quadrant with one player on it. So the space is already established. So as a result, I think that it's a little bit difficult to project the trajectory of where things are going with the analysts versus, get a snapshot of where things are today. But to kind of round out that final question, Kane, because I remember that you have something right here at the hour. I think that question is yet to be answered around, are things moving toward, breaking down technologies into their individual capabilities and then, selling off each of those capabilities and people can kind of package up their own experiences? Or is the future people pulling from a bunch of different tools, compiling them together in useful ways and having a cohesive product or a platform? My bet is the latter, because I think that people like things that are already assembled, and that's the bigger challenge is pulling together all the different pieces and making them work well together, not finding a tool, because it's easy to find tools, it's hard to stitch them together. So I think that that's probably where things are headed, but then that question is yet to be answered.
Interesting. I suppose it's a control question in part sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes if you have and control and talent, basically, you need the people within an organization to be able to build stuff if you do want to have that level of control and bring together these capabilities, or if you just want the output without lesser input, you want the results without the headache, then potentially the latter. But who knows? Horses for courses, I think.
Yeah. Well, Kane, really, really fun doing this again. I always love these. So thanks to you, and thanks to your audience, and thanks to the Reimagine the Contact Center audience as well. And excited to do another one of these soon.
Indeed, a couple of weeks' time, I think. Same bat time, same bat channel.
That's it. See
Appreciate
you,
it.
Kane. See you,
Speak soon,
everybody.
Marc.